Good evening, good evening, good evening, and welcome to this week's Rock Your Brand live stream. As you can maybe tell, I'm kind of losing my voice a bit, which is never great when you're going to be talking to people for about an hour, but I'm sure I will get through. Hopefully we're going to get some people joining the stream soon, and we can get going and start talking about today's topic. Slight change of camera angle again, from the previous live streams. Just wanted to shake it up a little bit, different background, and see how we go. So yeah, I'll just get started. And fonts are a massive area when it comes to design. And it's something that people can get wrong quite easily. They might find, and I'm talking mostly in the area of designing logos, brand identities. And when you're designing a logo, you need to have in mind what the personality is or the character of the brand that you are designing for. Because that's you want your logo to help give off that feeling, the emotion, the personality, as I've mentioned, the tone of the brand. You want the logo to help with that. Now, the logo won't do everything for your brand, but it will. It will sort of give people a nod or a hint in the direction that the brand is trying to go in terms of how it wants to make you feel about them. I just want to double check that we are definitely streaming. Apologies for this. This is what happens when you're live, though, isn't it? So let me just jump to my own channel. In the past, I've forgotten to make the stream public, and that's been a bit of an embarrassment. Nope, all looks to be good. Cool. Okay, so so we do have some people in the chat. Hey, Mohit, how you doing? Good to see you here. Okay, I'm noticing we've got some concurrent viewers, so that's cool. So yeah, like I say, so fonts help you to get across the character and personality of the brand through the logo design, and depending on your expertise as a designer, your knowledge of typography, your knowledge of fonts, then you're going to have a mixed bag of results. The more you understand typography, the better the end result. And now that might sound like common sense, but I've seen many logo designs where the fonts that have been used just do not match up with either the industry or the product or service that it's helping to promote. It's just a really bad disconnect between the two. And generally that just comes down to either the person who's creating the logo just doesn't have a lot of fonts to choose from. They've got a limited supply and they've just gone with one which they thought, that will do. Or they don't have a good understanding of what typography is and how it can affect the end result. So I thought it would be good to just do probably about an hour today and just go through some of the basics. As I mentioned at the start, this is a big topic, and you could have huge Skillshare courses, for example, on typography. I want to just kind of cover this as an overview, just to give some hints and tips on what the different type categories represent, so that when you are creating a logo, either for your own business or you're new to design and you're going to be creating your first logos, to let you at least know where you should start looking for fonts. What category? Okay, this is the type of business. This is the personality. I should be looking in this area of category for my type. I'm going to be just checking the chat. Mohit says, I live in India. I'm starting out as a brand designer. Recently completed 3 projects in my locality, but here people don't invest much on branding and online presence. Can you please guide me? Well, that's exactly what these live streams are for. And obviously I've got a lot of videos. I've got a big back catalogue of videos. So if you watch my content, then you will pick stuff up. Unfortunately, I can't mentor people one-to-one. I just haven't got the time for that because I've got all my client work. But hopefully through watching my content, Mohit, you will start to pick up some hints and tips that will help you go forward. I am going to start doing some logo critiques as well. So I am setting up a submission form for that. So if you create any logos, you can submit them. I can't guarantee that I will be able to critique everything, but if you've got logos done, I'll happily give some advice, and we'll do that online so that everyone can learn from that. Caroline saying that she's a big fan of font and color psychology. It's a fascinating topic. It is a fascinating topic, and it can make or break a brand identity if you get it wrong. If you get it right, it can be really, really effective. So let's just jump into looking at some of the typography stuff. Like I say, I don't want this to be too long. I don't know if my throat will actually last an hour, so we'll see how we get on. But one of the things that I'm saying is that there are different types of font that give off different emotions and feelings. And this one, a lot of people will have seen, but it gets across the message really well about the right font choice. So you can have the same wording, and you're like, and you want to get across a meaning. So we've got, I will be waiting for you, or I will be waiting for you. There's 2 very different meanings there, but we've not changed the words. All we've done is change the style of the lettering. We've just used a different font, and it gives across such a different feeling. And we laugh at these things. We go, that's really funny. But these types of mistakes are being made, maybe not to this extreme, but when it comes to logo design, there are some font choices being made that just don't quite fit what the brand is trying to convey. And it can really undo, or maybe not undo, a lot of hard work, but it can make marketing harder because you're, in people's minds, they're trying to balance up the messages about features and benefits and, what the brand's trying to sell them with the emotion and, as Caroline said, the psychology that's coming off of both the color and the typography. So, you need to be really be thinking about what you're trying to make people feel. Another example would be, if you were running a funeral home or a funeral parlor, you don't want to go quirky and funny. I'm all for, standing apart in if you're in a saturated industry, a saturated niche. Well, can you have a saturated niche? Is that kind of going against itself? If you're in a saturated sector, I'm all for trying to make your brand stand out and be different. But there's a certain level where people have expectations, and I'm pretty sure they don't want, quirky and funny funeral home. They would rather have something, which is taken seriously and is going to do things really well, attention to detail, and look after you. And so font choice there is going to be really, really critical. And so you don't want to go for this top font, which I believe is Curls. You want to go for something more along the bottom line, which is Trajan Pro or Trajan Pro. Fonts, I'm always getting the pronunciation wrong, but Trajan Pro, this bottom one, Trajan Pro, you'll see used a lot on film posters, especially sort of the epics. They use Trajan. It's got a bit of a cliche for film posters. Hey Fuad, good to see you back. Hopefully Ramadan went well, and it's Eid today, isn't it? Is it Eid today? So thanks for coming on. I really appreciate it. Caroline saying a great book to help understand the tone of fonts is Eric Speakerman's Stop Stealing Sheep and Learn How to Use Type. I've not heard that. I've not heard of that book, Caroline. At least I don't think I have. I've heard of Eric Speakerman, but I haven't heard of that book. So I'm gonna, I'll be making a note of that, and I'll make sure to check that one out. There are a couple of books that I will probably recommend at the end, or I'll put it in the comments. But definitely, there's a book called Why Fonts Matter, and I forget the name of the author. But that's a really, really good book. I might bring it up on Amazon or something before we end the stream. But I'll definitely check that one out. So yeah, so you just need to make sure that you're thinking about, the target audience and what is it they expect to see. Now, sometimes giving them the unexpected is good, but like I say, it really depends on the industry sector that you're in. You don't want to give people a shock where they don't want a shock. Different if you were like, if let's say a brewing company and you want to just really go bananas with your branding, that's fine. You can do that. It's, it's beer. You can go classic and sort of have a historical vintage edge with your beer brand identity, or you can just go completely modern, off the wall, crazy with it. You can't do that when it comes to funeral services. So just bear that in mind. So let's take a look at the main categories of type, and I hope that this is big enough. Some of you may be watching this on a smartphone, so the text might be a bit small. I will be reading through it anyway. So there are four, in my mind, there are four main categories, and then you can kind of break those down into subcategories. I've got a couple of the subcategories here, so I'll just go through them. So first one we've got is serif. And the serif category tends to give off a feeling of it's classic, refined, conservative, and traditional. That's the sort of feel that you'll get from a serif. Now, within serifs, you've got slab serifs. Now, I've got those there on screen because I feel that they do sort of stand out quite a bit. When you've got a serif font, a serif is the little tails and flourishes that you have on the ends of the letters. I'm not going to get into all of the technical names for each of those parts of letters, or more technical, if we're going to use the correct term, glyphs. I'm not going to get into that today. That's a whole other video. In fact, I'm sure I've got videos. I've got a playlist on my channel which is just about typography, and I think my typography basics goes into all the different parts of the glyphs. And then, so with slab serifs, that gives across a more vintage and rustic feel, and it can be quite masculine because it's slab serifs. They could be quite chunky and they're quite straight, so it feels more masculine, as opposed to serifs, which can feel a bit more feminine. They're a bit softer usually, the way the serifs are on the glyphs. Next up, you've got sans serif, and sans serif basically just means without serifs. And so they tend to look more modern, clean, geometric, and because they don't have the serifs on, they're more simplified, and it just gives a modern feel. Now, an example of that is Futura is quite a popular sans serif font, which is used by a lot of people. Helvetica as well, but Futura, if I remember rightly, it was designed, I think, in the 1920s. I think it's about 100 years old. It's a very old font, but it still looks very modern. But you've probably got some serif fonts which were designed 10 years ago but look, quite old. So I always find the Futura thing quite interesting. Helvetica is seen as being like, the designer's go-to. I'm not a big fan of Helvetica. I've never really kind of gone with it. I do like Futura though. Futura is a favourite of mine. Then we've got script, and script kind of speaks for itself. There's lots of flourishes on the letter. It looks like it's been written with a quill, and so that gives off a refined, feminine, ornate, and an elegant feel to it. So if you think about weddings and maybe some types of photography, if it's a photographer's brand, or you want that elegance to be there, because that's what people are looking for, that opulent side of things. Inside of that, you've also got handwritten. So, you think of the word script, writing and, script writing. Well, handwritten is obviously going to be in there, but handwritten tends to be a bit more friendly, relaxed and approachable. So you could almost think like ballpoint pen writing or marker pen writing, just a little bit more informal as well, which I don't have informal down there, but I would say informal is probably one of those things. And then the fourth main one is display. Now, display can cover a lot of different fonts, but generally it's ones which are novelty, they're a bit funky, unusual, experimental, like completely over the top. And with display fonts, you want to be, you don't want to write long sentences or paragraphs of text using display fonts, because it'd be really hard to read. But display fonts are really good for logos, because logos tend to be the company name, so it's usually quite short. But using a display font, you'll get a bit more character. If you're looking for something, like I say, novelty, unusual, a bit more funky, something that stands out, you probably wouldn't use a display font for being a wedding photographer or a wedding planner, unless you planned weddings that had a specific theme all the time. Maybe you were a wedding planner who does, weddings based on science fiction movies. I don't know, then you could maybe use a sci-fi type logo. So again, like I said at the start, think about what's the feeling you're trying to get from your brand. If you're trying to get across that you do sci-fi stuff and things, then choose a font which people will feel is quite, science fiction-y, and do that. That would really work as well. So, just here on the right, what I've done is I've got just hidden some bits because I didn't want to jump the gun too much. But this is how you can sort of break down serifs into other types. I'm not going to go into these today again. We've not got the time. But inside of serifs, you can have old style, transitional, modern, and as I've shown here, slab. For sans serif, you have what's known as grotesque, neo-grotesque, you can have humanist and geometric. Terrible spelling there from me. Let's put the E in there. And then for script, that can be broken down into formal, casual, calligraphic, so calligraphy, black letter. So black letter is like the Middle Ages. If you think castles and that type of lettering. and handwriting, which I've got down there as the friendly, relaxed, approachable, and as I would probably put in there, informal. Display is kind of what I've already got there: novelty, funky, unusual, experimental, and anything else you can think of that doesn't really fit into those categories which I'm showing on the screen. So let's take a look at some examples of famous brands and who use each of these categories. I've got a setup here. So we can see we've got up in the serif category, just before I jump into that, Caroline's posted again. Black letter is fascinating. It used to be the most legible font of its era, basically because that's all there was. Think monks hand lettering Bibles. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, if you think about Bibles, and especially the really decorative pages as well, and the lettering in there, and it is usually quite legible. And depending on how you use it, you can actually make it feel modern, depending on the context you're using it in. See it in a lot of, as a fan of hard rock, heavy metal, you see black letter quite a lot in logos for heavy metal bands and rock bands, because they're trying to give off a certain feeling in that as well. And it can be really legible, but then it can also be, depending on how far you take it, it can come across as fairly illegible. But again, we can maybe have a quick look at that after we've done these slides. So for serif, we've got Vogue, Time, Tiffany. So I should have copied them over, but we'll, kind of flick back and forth between the categories. So we had classic, refined, conservative, and traditional. And that's sort of what Vogue and Time and Tiffany, and co give off. It's that high-end, quality feel that they want to give. And Time magazine, being sort of, at the top end of their industry as well. And seeing, you get your face on Time magazine, and you've made it. So Time is the, sort of the upper echelons of magazines. Then you've got slab serif, and you've got things like Sony and Honda, and it just there's weight to that. Now, obviously, Sony are involved in lots of different categories, as are Honda. Honda, they've got their cars, they've got their motorbikes and stuff. I think also another one is Volvo. Volvo use slab as well, so it's kind of popular in the motor industry. For sans serifs are more of a modern look. So we've got things like Facebook and Google. Trying to look around, what have I got on my desktop? You've got Spotify. Those types of things are really, really modern. Then we've got Script, got Cadillac, and I've got Johnson & Johnson there. And for handwriting, now this is the thing, when you start to get into crossing between script and handwriting and display, you can get a bit of crossover, and you'll get people disagreeing on whether something's handwriting or script or it's display. So, the Sharpie logo and the Cadbury logo, they are handwritten, so they are within the script element, but not quite display. But the Walt Disney logo, for example, I've seen people say that that's a display logo rather than a handwritten logo or a script logo. So there is some fluidity between them, but you're not going to mistake a script or a handwriting font for a slab serif or a serif or a sans serif. So you still are going to pick the one which is going to reflect the categorization that we were looking for when we had this slide here. And if we look at these, they do all give off slightly different feelings. This one for Cadillac just speaks of, luxury. And you look at Sharpie and Cadbury, and they're just softer, and they feel more welcoming and more warm, a bit more fun. And then if we move over to display, Lego is almost handwritten, like it's just like bubble writing, and is kind of squishy. Even though Lego bricks aren't, Lego bricks are hard, but the logo for Lego, the Lego logo, gives off a feeling of fun and play, and that's the emotion and the feeling that they want to get across. They're not the logo isn't getting across the hard blocks or bricks that you put together, which are sharp on the edges. They've not got a sharp logo. They've got a soft, bouncy logo which conveys fun. So that works really well because that's what they want you to do with their product, is have fun and play. So it's not always about trying to replicate the product or service in the logo. And this is why I keep saying feeling and emotion rather than, straight conveyance of what the product is at the end of the day. Now, sometimes you will create, that is what you'll want to do, is have the logo convey what the product or service is, and it will work really well. But on a deeper sense, when you're working on the logo, you want to really be honed in on the strategic brand qualities that the messaging that you're trying to get across. And I suppose I should probably touch on, I'm going to check the chat in a second. I should touch on the fact that I'm a big believer in doing strategic work first before you work on the identity, before you work on the visual identity like the logo, because you have to have an understanding of who the brand is. And I mean who. You need to think of the brand as a person. The brand is going out there and interacting with people. So try to treat the brand like it's another person. How would it sound? How would it speak? How would it dress? What is it like? What does it hate? And by knowing the brand that way, you can then start to pull together how it should visually look, because you sort of have an idea of how it'll sound. How will it look? How do you tie those two things together? A lot of businesses don't do that strategy work. They just create a logo and run with it. But the problem is you get maybe a few years down the line and then the logo doesn't fit. What you thought was a great idea at the beginning just doesn't fit the brand anymore. But by doing, and you can at that point, you can sort of, work backwards and start looking at the strategic side of your brand a lot more, go a bit deeper, look at your audience, try to figure out who your audience are, what are their pain points, what is it they're looking for help with, how can you help them, what's the conversation that needs to take place, how does that conversation, what's the interaction like? Is it soft and guiding? Is it more authoritative and leading? These all have a difference. And as Caroline mentioned earlier, colour will come into play as well. And the psychological aspect of colour in combination with the psychological aspect and the feeling and emotion that comes from the type as well will help to imbue that brand as a person with a personality. And if you don't do that work at the start, how can you dress the brand if you don't know what the brand likes or stands for? Different if let's say you're a personal brand, the business is you, then you're probably going to have a good idea of what you like, but it's all about you. You are the brand. Let's maybe like a coach or a consultant, right? You're the brand. But if it's bigger than that, if you're going to have a brand that has staff, multiple products or whatever, then you need to create this brand entity that everyone else inside the brand can speak like when they are communicating on behalf of that brand. Otherwise, you're going to have everyone communicating in their own way, and that's just going to be messy because the customer is going to be hearing multiple different voices, different personalities, different ways of saying things, and it all just gets really confusing. So it's really important, and I just wanted to talk about that a little bit. I will be doing a live stream on brand strategy and the processes that I go through. I have done it a little bit on some of my case study videos, but I think it would be useful to do something like this, where I kind of, go through each segment and just sort of say, well, here's what this bit's for, and here's what we develop by doing that. And then that kind of leads up to the logo design part. So let's just see. Oh, Vegan Mortgage Advisor says he's here, but he's not here, so he's lurking and just listening. Fred said, is it just me, or the slab serif fonts give the feeling of serif and sans serif fonts? They do. They do. I feel that there's sort of this halfway house between the two. You're kind of taking the curvature of the serifs on the serif font, you're almost flattening them out. You're flattening and straightening them out on the slabs, which is taking you ever so slightly closer to the sans serif, which is, more sharp edges. And then when you chop them off, you get to the sans serif. So it's sort of a middle ground between the two, which is why with slab serifs, people sometimes use slab serifs when they want vintage. So you get, there was, again, going back to breweries, some breweries use that, to, even though they may be formed in 2015, they will use a slab serif in their logo to make it look like they've been around longer. So you get that sort of bit of a sort of a heritage feel from the serif, but not quite as old-fashioned looking as a serif might be. The slab serif has a little bit of that modernity that you get from the sans serif. So it's a good point, Fuad. No, you're not wrong. It's pretty much like that. Esteban didn't get the notification. I'm hearing that a lot. A lot of people aren't getting the notification, which is a right bummer. There's nothing I can really do about that. I do try to post on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn that I am going live, in an hour or 2 hours from that point. Maybe I need to just post on social 15 minutes before, but usually I'm just like trying to get everything ready, but I'll try to do that. And Fuad saying branding without strategy is just a waste of time and resources. I'm glad somebody else has said that and it wasn't just me. Some people see strategy, or brand strategy is talked about a lot these days. And some people see it as just some fluffy, oh, you need to find a purpose. Oh, we need to look at our vision. And they see them as fluffy things that really have no relevance. People don't buy from me because they like my, my vision. They buy my thing because they need my thing. That's true. People do buy what you have because they need it, but they also make a choice. It's not always about features and benefits. You might have the same features and benefits as someone else. There's usually another alternative that someone can go to, and so by having a strategy and a personality that's trying to attract a specific type of audience, you can build your brand that way, and that will attract them. A lot of it's subconscious stuff. You're influenced by it, but it's not really in your face. What I will say is that it does, if you've got a really strong brand strategy, it really helps with your marketing and your messaging, because you have a strong focus and a strong narrative and a strong story that you want to tell. And we all like stories, and we all like to, follow a story and be taken on that journey. And if you've got a really strong brand strategy with a story and a narrative of what you're trying to do, you'll bring people along on that and they'll become part of that. And that's what a really good strategy will do for you. And in the long term, it might cost you, a fair bit of money, let's say, to do a brand strategy well and do it deeply and really spend the time that it needs. But in the long term, it's going to save you money and it's going to save you time, because you're going to have a really, really strong focus on what it is that you need to be producing for your ideal audience. What happens with people who don't have a strategy is they tend to use a scattergun approach to try to sell to anyone and everyone. They will have the mindset of anyone can use our product, anyone can buy our product. But if you're trying to sell to anyone, that means that you're putting out a generic message which isn't really hitting home with someone. Whereas if you create a strategy and you pick a certain personality type or a certain type of person, and you know them inside out, you've done your research, where they hang out, magazines they read, computer games they play, Netflix series that they binge on, you can talk about that type of stuff to them in your marketing. So you're not even selling your product. You're creating a relationship, saying, I like the same stuff as you. That pulls them in and they start to like you and trust you, and it's know, like, and trust before they buy. If you've got that scattergun approach, you can't talk about the TV series that you all like. You can't talk about the music that you like. You can't talk about the movies that you like because you don't know what they like. And so they're not going to listen. Yes, you'll get the odd sale. You'll catch somebody who needs your thing at that moment in time. But what you want to do is you want to create relationships so that even if someone's not ready to buy your product or use your service at that point, you still want to keep a conversation going. Because when they are ready to buy your service or product, you want your name to be the one that's at top of mind, that they go, I like that brand. Now, they might not even know why. They might not remember why. But it's just because you've been putting out content and stuff that they've liked, or they've walked past and, oh, that's quite good. It's just, it sinks in and it just sits there. It gives people a good feeling about the brand. Oh yeah, they've given me a good feeling. And then you get a lot of brands where we all go, I don't like them very much. Anyway, I've kind of gone off on tangent a little bit into why strategy works. But it does work. You wouldn't think about Coca-Cola. Everyone knows who Coca-Cola are, but they still continue to spend millions, probably billions in advertising globally all the time because they're getting across that message that they want to get across. There's a sort of, sharing and family time and fun and stuff, even though, it's Coke and it's not really the best thing for you. But that's why they're doing that messaging, and, they have to keep on top of that. That's their strategy. We don't all have that type of money. So we need to be very focused so that we use our time and our money in the best possible way. We can't globally blanket the world in red and white, holidays are coming adverts. We need to go, who's my ideal customer? How do I attract them? How can I make my brand look and talk and feel like it's the right brand for them? And that's what strategy work does. And when you've got that, you can dress your brand, which is your brand identity, which is your logo. If you don't know who you are and what you like, you can't put on a suit of clothes that will fit that brand. Anyway, let's go back to the chat, see what's being said. So Fuad's talking about the notification problem. He said he solved it by unsubscribing and resubscribing again and activating the notification bell with all options selected. So if you're watching this, that's how to do that. Nicole says, please give advice on when to use condensed type for logo fonts. Again, it's really going to, what's the feeling that what's the feeling, what's the industry sector is going to depend on what you want. A condensed font is going to feel, it can feel quite claustrophobic because it is quite squashed, but it can work really well for, I think it works quite well for sort of more tech or digital type stuff that that closeness, you know, almost like a digital thing. It's hard to kind of just off the cuff say what I would use it for. But condensed fonts, you need to be careful with them because they'll look fine at a large size. But if, you know, let's say you're creating something for an app, which is going to be on a smartphone at small sizes, just be careful that it's actually going to be legible. You want to, you know, really think it might look really cool on a big poster or on a big screen whilst you're designing it, but then you're like, oh man, that's got to sit really small in the top left-hand corner of a screen. And when you get it to that size, all the letters just start to mush together. In that instance, you may have an alternative version of the logo. God, it was a long time ago now. I think I did a video on it about responsive logos, where as the screen real estate gets smaller, your logo gets simpler, and so it, you know, you start to get rid of bits and you condense it down. I'm pretty sure I've got a video on that. I might even have a blog on that as well on my website. If you go and have a look, just do a search for responsive logo on either my website or my YouTube channel, and it will kind of show that. So I would probably say that you'd maybe have to do that if you use condensed fonts. Some condensed fonts aren't that condensed, but there are some which are really, really condensed. Fuad saying, this is where my throat's going. Fuad saying, what's the characteristics of display fonts? I mean, how to recognize them. I would say a display font is a font which doesn't fit into serif, slab serif, sans serif, or script. It's kind of, you know, more unique. Like I mentioned before, you wouldn't want to create long headlines or blocks of copy using it. Something a bit more fun. Oh, not that one. You know, the funky. So things like, you know, maybe a graffiti, you know, type font. Tattooists use, tattooists sometimes use black letter that we talked about earlier on, but tattooists tend to have fairly funky looking hand-drawn stuff, which I would class as display. Like I say, it's a bit, you know, it can all be a bit fluid. And it does the situation that it needs to be in as well. There is lots of other reading. And like I say, I will do, I'm probably going to have to do a video series. I'll have to do a separate video on serif, a separate one on slabs, separate one on sans serif, and really go into it and show more in depth how things could go. I just haven't got the time to go that in depth into it this evening, as I really don't think my voice is going to hold out for much longer. Caroline's saying, this is gold. I work in the exact same way as you're describing when I design for clients. You and I need to have a nerd chat about fonts. I could talk about fonts all day, Caroline, all day, every day. Great to hear that we work in a similar way. I know a lot of other people who work in a similar way as well. You know, we've all got our own ways of working and what's worked for our clients. I'm always learning and trying to improve on my systems and the way that I do stuff. The biggest change for me over the past sort of 5 or 6 years has been really implementing the strategic side into my process. I used to do a little bit of it, you know, just to get an idea of the personality, but really it was surface level stuff. But now I really go deep with it, and that way I make sure that I get a logo which, you know, really is going to merge seamlessly in with that. Fuad saying, branding is how you represent your brand, while strategy is how you behave. Yeah. So I would say strategy is the meaning. So strategy is the meaning of the brand, and your identity is how you get that meaning across. So it's very similar to what you're saying, Fuad. So without meaning, if all you've got is, you know, if I'm saying that the identity is to get across the meaning of your brand, if you don't have any meaning, what is the identity saying? I like this font and I like this color, which is how a lot of logos are designed. They're designed because the business owner likes the logo. The logo hasn't been designed to fit the brand and help convey the feeling, the meaning, the messaging of the brand. So when I think about design, so the difference between design and art, design has a function and a purpose. It's trying to solve a problem, and that problem in terms of a logo is getting across the brand meaning. If you haven't got any, then is that logo just a piece of art that doesn't serve a purpose? Which is why further down the line, businesses and brands get into problems when they're like trying to expand and attract a larger audience or a more focused audience, and they're like, we're going to have to rebrand because this isn't working. Whereas if you spend the time with the strategy, you may have to change your logo further down the line, but the chances are it's probably going to be more of an evolution, a tweak, a simplification, maybe just a slight adjustment, and it just to maybe reflect a change in the times or a change in the way people think a little bit. So it's really I love my job. I love thinking about all of that type of stuff. But there's never enough hours in the week to do it all. Fuad saying Disney have done a responsive logo. I think I remember seeing that actually. Nikhil, why are companies going to all small case font recently during the refresh? That's a good question. I think a lot of it is because more and more of them are doing more of their selling online, and their older logos weren't really that compatible for screen use. Maybe there were some really thin lines, so when the logos were getting small, you were losing some of the detail. So they tend to go, they're going more sans serif. Sans serif fonts are great for screens, and so they're going down that route. And I do actually have a note. We'll get to that screen in a little bit, talking about, because I think you said, small case. I've got a note that we'll talk about shortly about small case as well. Caroline's logging off. Okay, hope I didn't miss you. Enjoy your website work, Caroline, and hopefully we'll see you again next week. And maybe we'll get that nerdy typography chat done at some point. Just checking through my list of stuff that I make sure that I don't miss anything. No, I think we're on track. One of the things which I haven't kind of put here is that you can, when you're creating a logo, you can mix, you can have, let's say you've got your main brand name and then you've got a tagline underneath. You can have the logo as a sans serif, and then you could have the tagline as a sans serif. Or it may actually work if you have a sans serif and a serif. But generally, I would maybe, when it comes to, choosing a font pairing, if you're using a sans serif for your logo and, maybe your headlines, go for a serif for the body copy, just to kind of change things up a little bit. Again, what you can do there is you can really kind of get more focused in on that feel that you're trying to get with the brand. So you can get sort of the best of a sans serif with maybe just that little touch of a serif in the body copy to give a bit of sophistication to a more modern looking brand. You can play with that and just see what works. Let's see. I'm going to have to speed up because my throat is killing me. So one of the things that you can do as well is you can find, if you find, let's say, a sans serif that you like, but it's a bit, some sans serifs can be pretty sharp on the corners, really angled and sharp, and that's not what you want you don't want that feeling from your brand. You can go in, and so this is, what's this? This is Montserrat Black. And then what I've done is I've just outlined this, turned the font to shapes. And then I've gone and selected all the corners, and I've rounded each corner at this particular size by 5 points and just softened off those edges. And that just gives a different subtle feel compared to the original font typed out. It helps soften it down, takes the harshness away, and sometimes that's all you need, is just to bring a little bit more, I'll say, human side to it, just a little bit of softness, a little bit of warmth, as a counter to this sharp, angular, razor feel that's on this one. But again, sometimes you're going to want the brand to have that sharpness. You could say if it was like for a brand of razors, then you want sharpness. You want, clean cut. You want that sharpness. You wouldn't want to use a rounded one because that would potentially, give off a feeling of bluntness, and you don't want blunt razors, so that's one way of just taking a font that you like, you like the overall look of it, the thickness of it, and the width and the height, but you just need to change that little element to bring it in, soften it down so that it works for the brand that you're working on. DBZ Collector, I always find myself doing small case font logos. Some people's niche. Some people like doing all lowercase. I'm a bit of a fan of lowercase, and we're going to get into that now as to why I think lowercase is quite good. Fuad's saying font tweaking is my favourite part, makes unique and reframes its personality. That's the thing as well, is that sometimes, I think I've got a note here actually. So one of the notes that I've got written down there is that when you're choosing a font, if you're creating a logo that has a symbol, it's got a graphical mark, you need to choose a font which is going to work with that. So if you've got a really solid, chunky mark, you don't want to choose a font which is like wispy and maybe a script or light. You want something like this Montserrat Black. You want something that's weighted, that's going to really balance up, or your logo is going to look either left-handed heavy or right-handed heavy. If you've got quite a lightweight mark but then a really heavy type sitting next to it. So you need to make sure that those balance up as well. In terms of upper and lower, I tend to use lower. Again, I think lowercase is more open, more welcoming, a bit softer. We all know that if you're in a chat room or something and you type in all caps, you're shouting. It's loud. It's visually loud. The same can be said for all caps in a logo. But sometimes you want that. All caps can show off authority. So if you're like a financial institution or you're a leader or a coach or something that's very, a ruler, like one of the archetypes, if you're a ruler archetype brand, then you want to have that status, then all caps is the way to go. Lowercase is again a bit like, almost like rounding off. It just takes away the loudness from it and makes it more approachable. Now, obviously, as well, you can still go with leading case, You know, if this was called my brand, you could even have, you know, leading case. I had that as one word, but you know, if it was two words, you know, you could do that. You could go leading case, which is the formal and, you know, the correct way to do it. And I've done many logos like that, you know, where you've got leading upper. But then you can also, there are also fonts where you could, not all fonts have the capability to do it, but you can, you know, I've seen this a lot. Now, I've just changed this to, you know, small caps there. And it's the right weight for this. What you will often see, and let's just do it. Let's just do it with this one here, right? I want to do this because I see this all the time. Never do this. It's not how you do it, right? So they want to have all caps, but they still want to have a leading cap. Do this. They do this, right? Shrink it down. But that's then not balancing up with that. You need to, it's the same with this. It's not, you know, it doesn't balance, it doesn't read right. I've seen ones where, you know, it's not even the same weight. It's like, you know, that. Now, unless you're purposefully wanting to do that and there's a good reason to do it, then don't do that. It doesn't work, and just looks really amateurish. It doesn't work at all. It's for me, it's in the same level as stretching or squashing is a bit of a no-no. I am all for, as Fuad has said earlier, I'm all for adapting type, but you have to do it in a sympathetic way, I think. You know, if you want to try to retain some of the characteristics of the font you're using, then try to be sympathetic with what the original designer was trying to do. There are there are people out there who are typographers who probably are screaming at me for rounding off corners. And I get it. You know, I get it. The font was designed to be the way it was designed. And then people like me come along and start messing around with it. But that's what I do. And I do that to try to get it to express the brand in the way that I feel that it needs to be expressed. But to get back to the lowercase as well, often you will see a lot of digital companies and brands going all lowercase. If we go back to our examples, Facebook is an example of that, where they've gone all lowercase. Trying to think of other stuff. I'm sure people can, anyone who's watching can put in the chat some examples of all lowercase. I think, is Spotify all lowercase as well? Flickr is all lowercase. There's a lot of brands that are all lowercase. And in my eyes, what that does, again, is it just, with a lot of online companies and tech companies, it's all digital, and digital can be cold. It's a cold industry. There's, you know, it's just ones and zeros, you know. So by going all lowercase, you're bringing some of that human element to it in a very small way. You know, you're just kind of making it more approachable, less technical, I suppose is the phrase I want to use. Nicole's saying he feels that Facebook was better off with the F being in caps. I'm neither here nor there with it. I try not to get too worked up when logos change. I know some people up in arms about it. That's usually because they're looking at the logo in isolation. I'm guilty of this. I've been guilty of it before, which is why I try not to judge if someone shows me a new logo, I will obviously have my opinion on how that logo looks, but the first thing I will do is I will go and try to find where I can see this logo in use, animations, in print, on posters, and it's usually at that point that you go, I can see what they're doing with this now. That works really, really well. It gives you a whole other understanding of it. Logos in isolation, they're very rarely in isolation. I mean, they're in isolation now because we're doing this as a lesson, but for most consumers, the logo is not going to be in isolation. It's going to be next to messaging or photography or graphics or in an animation. So it's going to be backed up with some other visual representation to help tie the logo to the brand. But yeah, I'm trying to remember what the Facebook one was. But again, this just might be Facebook trying to be more approachable. They're not exactly going through the best of times, and in my opinion, quite rightly so. So these can also, by changing logos to make them look more friendly, is trying to offset certain things. It's a reason why a lot of companies rebrand. They're rebranding to try to distance themselves from a situation that's happened that probably didn't reflect well on the brand. So rebrand, new messaging, new taglines, new slogans to try to just over time through marketing and advertising distance themselves from the bad press that they had. I'm not saying all rebrands are that. Some rebrands are just because the company's been taken over, new management, they want to put their stamp on the company, or the company's moving into new areas. There are positive reasons for rebranding, but there are also, reasons to rebrand where it's not been great, and that's why they're doing it. Yeah, I'm skipping comments. Airbnb, Adidas are lowercase. Sorry, I get carried away. I get too carried away when I'm talking about these things. So that was kind of all I had in terms of my slides today. Like I say, this was just going to be an hour, and it was just an overview, just to sort of bring people up to speed with, the categories and try to stick to categories. And I understand the display category is a tricky one because it covers so much, and it's difficult to, go, is that a display one, or is that, it looks like a slab one, but it's, it's got bits taken out of it. And so that's what I'm saying. It might look like a slab or it might look like a serif, but if it's been experimented on and it's been made to look, more funky, and you'd probably be like, I probably wouldn't use that. If I was writing a blog or an article, I wouldn't use that as my headline, or my sub-headline font. It would just look too weird. Then it's more than likely a display font, which would be good for a poster, or a logo, rather than using it in traditional type, headlines, subheadlines, body copy. That's, in my head, that's how I do it. But I don't think that's a traditional way of doing it, but it helps me work out where I see display fonts. So what I was going to do was just quickly say one of the best things to do when you are working with fonts is to have a font manager rather than, if I go back to desktop again, will help if I had things open. Yeah, here we go. Rather than, just going through your type menu and, looking at fonts this way, or, choosing your font, and then let's see, we choose your font and then you click on font and you're moving up and down, which I've seen people do. You'd be there forever, you would be there forever. Get yourself a font manager if you don't have one, because it will save you a ton of time. I personally use this one, which is Fontbase, which lets me see all of the fonts on my system, but they're not all active. The downside of the way I just showed you, where you're flicking through all of your fonts, means that those fonts all have to be active on your system. And if you've got, like me, thousands and thousands of fonts, that's just going to slow your system down, especially those of you who work on laptops and things. It's the number of small files just kind of clogs things up. Technology is getting better. You've got the M1 Max now and stuff, so stuff's getting faster. But it's just always good to, if you don't need to have a font active on your system, then don't have it active. And that's where a font management software will come in. It will let you activate and deactivate fonts as and when you need them. The cool thing about Fontbase is that it ties into Adobe Creative Cloud, so that if I've got any fonts in my documents, when I open a document, if I don't have the font active on my system, Fontbase activates it whilst I'm working on it, and then when I close the document, it automatically deactivates the font again for me. So I don't have to manually do it. But I can also manually activate and deactivate fonts, and I'll show you how that works if I bring up Fontbase. So this is my let me just switch this off so we've got a clean background. So this is my Fontbase here. So you see I've got 9,602 fonts here. So I can click on all and it shows all of the fonts I have. Many of them are terrible and I would never ever use them. Now there's a little button here. So if it's empty, it's not active on my system. It's just in a folder, but it's not active. If I wanted to use this one called 10 minutes, I would never ever want to use this. I just click on that and it's now active on my system, and I can use it in Illustrator or any application on my PC, and then I can just undo it again. I can search for specifics, so I can anyone that begins with MONT or has MONT in it. I can view by a grid as well, so if I take the search off, I can kind of have a much quicker search, and if I wanted to, I just type in the words that I'm trying to look for, because that then helps you make your choices better. Fontbase is a free tool. If you want the Adobe Creative Cloud integration, you need to pay for it. It's $3 a month. It's next to nothing, really. So I pay the $3 a month, and I get access to that functionality. But it is free. If you don't want that Creative Cloud functionality, it is free. And to be honest, if you don't have a font manager, install this free version and work with this. You can create folders, so you can gather together all of your fonts. So I buy quite a lot of the design cuts packages. This one was the definitive designers package, so you can see here these are all the fonts that were in there. I can make them bigger so I can see what I'm looking for. You can go into each one, so it tells you how many different fonts there are inside the typeface. If I go and view details, here's all the fonts in there, and it will show you all of the glyphs, so I can see what all the glyphs are that I'll get, and it has a waterfall as well. So that's really useful for letting you see whether it is going to be a good choice if you're thinking of using it for body copy, for paragraphs of text, and you can see whether it's going to work. And I can kind of flick through all the different weights and see how they all will look. It gives you access to all of the Google fonts as well. So the Google fonts are free for commercial use, and there's some really, really good ones in there. I use Google fonts for some of my clients' logos. It's helpful for them, especially if they want to use things like Canva. Canva has access to all the Google fonts, so it's just easy for them to create their own graphics and stuff. But this is really, really useful. You can also change it to, well, whatever color you want, but I generally change it to black and white. Sometimes it's easier to see what a font looks like in black and white when you're scrolling fast through them. It helps them to stand out a little bit more, a little bit easier. So that's a really good one. Now, if you don't want to do that, then there is another option, which is called Wordmark.it or .it, and what this will do is you can type in a word. So if I type in rock your brand, it will look on my computer and it will pick up, well, initially what it'll do is it'll pick up all your system fonts. So it picks up all the fonts, you know, basically the base fonts that are on your system. But if you install the Google Chrome extension, so you have to be using Google Chrome, what it will do is it will take it a step further and it will show a lot more of the fonts that you've got on your computer. And then if you want to go further than that, you can go for their Pro account, which looks like it's $4 a month. You've got tagging, Google Fonts, export image, night theme. Basically, all these things here are pretty much in Fontbase. And if they're not, they're probably going to be coming soon. Fontbase is developed by one guy, I believe, but he's really reactive to requests, and the more people request a specific thing, that gets moved to the top of the list, and he works on that first. So I much prefer, this is good if you're maybe using a computer, you know, that's someone else's, I don't know, and you just want to find out what fonts are on it. But I would much rather use Fontbase. As Fuad has said, it's free anyway, and then you just pay the money if you want to upgrade to the additional functionality, like Creative Cloud. Let me see. Yeah, I think that was it. I think that was it for today. My throat is killing me. So thank you for putting up with that. I will be back next week. I'm not sure what I'm going to do next week. I did put the poll up. So I had the poll up, which was for this topic and logo mascots. Now, I'm pretty sure someone's been asking me to do a video on logo mascots. So it may be that I'll do that next week. Just do a really quick overview on logo mascots, you know, the different, just go through some examples of brands that use mascots. It's just another way of giving personality to your brand, but in a much more upfront way. You know, we talked today about sort of subliminal, subconscious messaging, you know, and the psychology and things of it. If you create a mascot, it's up front and center and it's there to represent your brand. So we can have a look at that, I think, next week. That'll be a fun one to look at. Hopefully my throat won't be dying by that point. Thank you to everyone that's come on today, and thank you to anyone who's watching this as a replay. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, please do. Give this live stream a like if you found it useful. It does help the channel. Helps the YouTube algorithm to see that I'm producing stuff that people want to watch. And I will be back next week. Just keep an eye on the community tab for updates on what I'm doing. I have bought a 3D printer recently and I'm having lots of fun with that. And as has been mentioned, if you're not receiving the notifications as to when I go live, or you're not receiving notifications about messages or new uploads, unsubscribe from the channel and then resubscribe again. Click the little bell icon and just tick all notifications and you will get to see that. So thank you all, and I will see you next week. You know what I'm going to say? Stay creative, folks. Bye for now.